There was this message even a few years ago about hustling and about women having and doing and being it all. And we can be in the corporate space and we can be moms and we don't have to make any sacrifices. And it almost feels like in some ways this is just a different version of that, where it's like you're still supposed to be doing everything. And there are all these new tasks and responsibilities that we've moralized in ways that the Bible doesn't.
Hey, it's Erin and Whitney again. We're so excited to be here with you. Today we're talking about something that I find fascinating, and is being a Tradwife biblical? So we're going to have a conversation about this. Welcome, Whitney. I know you're going to have lots of good insight and good things to say, as you usually do.
Thanks. Yeah, so the Tradwife Trend has really been sort of taking over social media in the last few months and years. And it's really when you see, these women in these beautiful prairie dresses baking sourdough bread from scratch and feeding their chickens. And, a lot of the time it's like we're a no screen time family and we're homeschooling and
we live out in the in the field, the wheat fields.
We've got our land.
And we're growing our own garden. And,
totally. It's very idyllic, but it does involve, women sort of this reinvigoration of interest in homemaking and in this really traditional and I think wholesome version of homemaking. But you see it all over social media now. And what I've found really fascinating is that it seems like especially Christians have really latched on to this vision for motherhood and for homemaking that's kind of been set forth by this trend. So I think it's really interesting to kind of just talk about what are the good things about this? Maybe where are some of those places we need to be careful? But yeah, I know you have a lot of thoughts too.
Well, it's interesting because my generation, many of the things that the Tradwife is saying on social media align with kind of my generation, that we were staying at home, that we were raising our kids, we were focusing on homemaking, but it still didn't look the same for everybody across the board. I know for me that I enjoyed some pieces of that, but I also would go and work one shift a week at the hospital or something along those lines. And it's interesting that it's all over social media and being so publicized because we did that, but we didn't call it being a Tradwife.
It didn't have a hashtag.
Right. So I'm fascinated with this. I don't know, what do you make of it?
So it's been interesting because when this whole thing kind of came about, I was working full time for a corporate job and I was having my kids and I was working on other projects that were very much outside of the home and not the baking of bread, that's for sure. And I really found myself idealizing, like, how nice would it be if I could just focus on being at home and focus on making our home this wonderful place. And I almost found it becoming a source of, I want to say, like, envy and guilt, but also just like longing. And so thinking about that and realizing there's something beautiful about that, right? Like there's something beautiful about wanting to be the best mom and wife that you can and to sort of take ownership of these things that for a long time our culture has said don't matter as much as going off to the corporate world and making money. The problem for me has been, again, sort of that when it's a source of envy. And I realized, my friend who's able to live this homesteader life has a lot of money coming in from her husband's work. And I'm married to a pastor. So that's always funny too, because you're like, I'm supposed to be like the ideal Christian wife, right? I'm married to a pastor. And yet pastors don't get paid the way you need to get paid. So homestead, let me just tell you. So there's kind of that dynamic. And then also just the guilt. I think the guilt that felt like I need to be baking all of our goods from organic ingredients and I need to figure out how to DIY all these herbal remedies and that part really actually became kind of hard on me. So it drew me into this conversation about like, okay, is this actually like God's design for me as a wife and mom? Do I have to do this?
Yes, but even as you're talking, I'm like, God created us all so uniquely and differently. We all have skill sets and preferences, and because that wasn't me either. I mean, the bread making machine came out when I was when I had young kids. And I mean, it was a big deal for me to throw a mix into the bread machine and it would mix it up and I would home make my bread. But a lot of my friends making their own baby food, and that was never me. And it's recognizing that we're all created differently on purpose, with purpose. And so your life might look a whole lot different than your friend down the street or the girls in the Bible study as it did for me. And it's really embracing that. And then, of course, throw in the Proverbs 31 woman.
Right, which I have spent a lot of time studying even before this was a
Yeah.
trend, because I think it was at some point in college when a professor basically just illuminated the reality of like, so if you look at the context for this verse and the time at which this was happening, this woman physically could not have been all of these
No,
things,
no.
especially not all at once in the same season of life.
Right.
So the two, I think, best interpretive angles on this are A, this is sort of different seasons of life as a woman
Right.
that are all worthwhile things to aspire to, but certainly not rigid expectations.
Right.
Or these are just good things. These are good
Yes.
things to aspire to, and it doesn't have to be in any way,
Right.
dictating what you feel pressured to be as a wife and mom at
A
any moment.
checklist.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've heard that it's really her lifetime accomplishment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's great. All of our lifetime accomplishments are going to look different, right? Because again, we're created differently and we have different desires and goals, and we've been equipped in specific ways. And I would say, awesome. And homemaking is great. And there's those that are going to love it and have the giftings to just pour into that fully. And there's those that either can't do that financially, or they are better moms when they have this thing over here. I know for me, when I went and worked my 1 shift a week at the hospital, I came home as a much better mom because I appreciated it more. And I was more centered and able to go over here and be filled up and then to come back. Not that that was always filling, I was pouring out, but it was stimulating. It was good for me. And I know that, especially I'm sure as a pastor's wife, externally, you're going to hear a lot of chatter about what you're doing or not doing.
Right. Well, and I think it does feel like, there was this message even a few years ago about hustling and about women having and doing and being it all. And we can be in the corporate space and we can be moms and we don't have to make any sacrifices. And it almost feels like in some ways this is just a different version of that, where it's like you're still supposed to be doing everything. And there are all these new tasks and responsibilities that we've moralized in ways that the Bible doesn't. And so I think to your point, it's remembering as Christian wives and moms, looking at the lives of other Christian wives and moms, whether it's in comparison or whether we're like looking down on them for not doing certain things, that a lot of this is not coming from the Bible. Like, if you are making sure that your kids are nourished, you're doing a great job. It doesn't have to be organic sourdough. Like,
I love it.
And
although if you would like to make it and bring it to my house, I'd love that.
Like, I'm not saying it's bad. Like, certainly not sinful to have organic sourdough.
Right. Yeah.
I will accept it. But yeah, I think just making sure that we're not accidentally moralizing things according to culture, instead of looking to God, who every time is going to offer grace and is going to say, don't cut the corners that really matter. But if you need a break, I have rest for you. I want you to rest. I want you to order the takeout. I want you to cut that unnecessary responsibility off your plate. And I have to stay in that frame of mind constantly, I think.
Yeah, I'm so with you. In the season I'm in right now, I'm just starting my very last class for my doctorate.
Oh my gosh.
And I was telling someone yesterday that, there are things that I absolutely need to take care of in my home. My closet is one of them. What's outside of my closet that has become kind of part of the decor needs to be cleaned up, and it will happen, but just not right now. And I keep telling Greg, I'm so sorry. I know it's a mess. And he's like, it's okay. We'll take care of it. You'll take care of it when you have time. And I will.
Well, and that actually brings up a really good point, because I think this Tradwife movement, in as much as it's affected women, has also sort of started to affect the way men think about household responsibilities and homemaking.
Yes.
So in your experience, even just based on what you're saying now, but maybe earlier in your marriage too, how do you set realistic expectations about homemaking and all of this stuff with your husband?
Yeah, it's so interesting because looking back, I really took on, this is all my responsibility. And I didn't use my voice to engage in a conversation with my husband to say, like, I need help. We've got poor kids that have dentist appointments and doctor appointments and haircuts and all of these things. And, how do we work at this together as a team? But he would have had no idea that I was overwhelmed because I didn't tell him. And so today it's a whole lot different because I do use my voice and we do engage in a conversation of, hey, this is what's on the docket. How can we work at this together? and set realistic expectations around what is happening in the home. Amazingly, my husband has begun cooking. He cooked a great meal last night, which years ago, I don't know that, and if I would have asked him, he certainly would have, but it was kind of on my plate, that it was my job to cook. And I took on that role, which I don't really love to cook. He actually does a really good job. And so it looks different for everybody. What have you experienced? What have you and Tanner done?
Well, yeah, I think even just reflecting on the term homemaking, it's like,
Mhm.
I want my husband to also make this home.
Yes,
You know?
because it is his home,
Right.
his family too.
Yeah. So I think partnering in the fact that, this domestic life is both of ours.
Mhm.
And again, sort of realizing like what pieces of this are actually fun for me
Mhm.
versus what pieces of this are just like weird pressures.
Yeah.
And wherever those two things don't line up in
Mhm.
me and Tanner's assessment of the
Mhm.
situation, have a conversation. Thankfully, he does not have a super high bar in the
Well, and it's even going, who's best at what? We're a team. So if you're skilled in cooking, do that. How can I support? As well as if you're great at cleaning and you enjoy that, great. Or the outside stuff, whatever. It really is going, how do we do this best
Absolutely.
together?
And I think ultimately just remembering that pressure and anxiety and envy and guilt are not feelings that come from God's design for our marriages and our homes. So if that is the takeaway feeling, if that's what we're constantly struggling against, we need to probably look at that and really try to make sure that the responsibilities we are taking on are biblical and not these cultural social media trends
Totally.
that are incidentally coming from women who are working very, very hard
Yes.
behind the scenes to
Right.
make all this content happen.
Yes. Whitney, thank you so much for being here. What a fun conversation.
I know, so much more to say.
Yes, me too.